What's up, Taiwan? Good evening. I'm Liao with 10 minutes of news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Taiwan's Vice President William Liao has attended the funeral of Japan's late former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in Tokyo. The ceremony was limited to family members and those close to Abe, but members of the public have been gathering around Tokyo's Zojoji Temple to pay their respects. Abe was gunned down during a campaign speech on Friday. Japan is reeling from the shock killing, which has reverberated around the world. Liao is the highest-level Taiwan official to visit Japan since the two countries severed official ties 50 years ago. Tokyo says Liao attended the funeral in a private capacity. Foreign dignitaries and leaders around the world have been paying tribute to a statesman who transformed both Japan and its place on the international stage. Ryan Ho Kilpatrick has this report on Shinzo Abe's enduring legacy.
From all around the world, tributes to Shinzo Abe have been flooding in. From Taiwan, which considered Abe a friend and a supporter of its democracy.
南北前首相是深受国际推崇的国际领袖，毕生致力于维护民主、自由、人权的价值。
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken made an unscheduled trip to Tokyo while traveling in Asia to offer Washington's condolences. The U.S. considers Japan a key ally in the region.
He was deeply committed to strengthening the alliance and friendship between the United States and Japan and pursuing an open and free Indo-Pacific region.
Abe was the architect of the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, or Quad, a strategic security forum that brought together Japan, the U.S., Australia, and India.
शिंजो आबे जी भारत के जनमन में सालों तक बसे रहेंगे.
Japan has lost a true patriot and a true leader. And Australia has lost a true friend.
Abe was shot during a campaign speech in the city of Nara on July 7th. The assassination shocked Japanese society and prompted an outpouring of grief and praise for a statesman who left his country's position on the world stage transformed.
One of the things that he will be remembered for the most is for changing the global posture of Japan, especially when it comes to security, diplomacy, and defense issues, especially in the region. When he came to power, Japan was a rather inconsequential actor, I would say, on those fronts. And he always dreamt of making Japan a more important actor.
Abe will be remembered as a tireless diplomat. During his second and final term in office, from 2012 to 2020, he visited more than 176 countries and regions.
He was very important in drawing the region closer together. He was very active in diplomacy. He made more than 80 trips abroad, which was a very high rate of diplomacy, of trips abroad.
But not everyone backed Abe as he carved out a bigger role for Japan. Many at home opposed his moves to loosen post-war restrictions on Japan's defense forces. His refusal to acknowledge Japan's wartime atrocities weighed on strained relations with China and made him a resented figure in South Korea.
There's no doubt that during the record-breaking tenure of Abe, when he was in office for about 8 years, there were frictions certainly reached a higher level. He often was accused of beautifying the history of Japan, especially during World War II and before World War II. China and Japan, of course, are bound to be rival. They both have very different goals for the region. When it comes to South Korea, I think there are some efforts right now to mend fences between the two sides.
Both his supporters and critics agree. Abe brought Tokyo back to the global stage in a way unseen for decades. The passing of Japan's longest-serving prime minister leaves an indelible mark, not only on his own country, but the whole world. Ryan Ho Kilpatrick for TaiwanPlus.
While Japan and Taiwan do not have formal diplomatic relations, Abe was seen as a staunch supporter of Taiwan in the face of China's rising aggression. As a former Japanese colony, Taiwan and Japan have shared a close but complicated link for over a century. Ryan Hill Kilpatrick spoke with historian James Lin of the University of Washington, who tells us how Taiwanese attitudes towards Japan have changed over time.
With democratization starting in the 90s, especially in the 2000s, with the opening up of the education curriculum, there became a more public space for revisiting Taiwan's history under Japanese colonial rule. an opportunity to be nostalgic about that period, because that was the period when Japanese rule was kind of at its most thriving in terms of the economy, in terms of the safety that it offered for Taiwanese people. And so I think that part of that affinity continues into how Taiwanese society sees important Japanese political figures like Abe.
What do you think it is about that era that people look back fondly upon, despite all the implications of being colonial subjects at the time?
Part of it has to do with the generational divide. That a good example that was raised by a number of scholars is Li Denghui, who was the first freely elected president of Taiwan. Li Denghui is someone who has been very public about his affinity for Japanese rule. He's of that generation. He was a teenager when he was living under Japanese rule, went to secondary higher education in Japan, and he came back as an adult to Taiwan, and then he was met with Kuomintang rule. And Kuomintang rule was very repressive during that period. And people like Li, they kind of remember their youth being something that was, Taiwan had economically prospered. It was a very safe society. And then all of a sudden they were met by this very repressive regime. And so I think that a lot of it has to do with a certain kind of memory about, what it was like when you were a teenager during these kind of the halcyon, or the best part of Japanese rule, and then you meet the worst part of Kuomintang rule that immediately follows it.
And in a symbol of the close ties between the two countries, Japan has ordered 3 tons of Taiwan's grouper fish, which was banned by China last month. The Pingtung County Magistrate held a moment of silence for the late Shinzo Abe at the signing ceremony for the agreement. The first batch of frozen shipment will be sold in Yamaguchi Prefecture, Abe's hometown. 30 tons of live fish will be exported at the end of the month. Pingtung is the largest grouper farming region in Taiwan. The local government has been looking for alternative export markets following the Chinese ban. Taiwan has made significant progress on its first domestically produced submarine. The Defense Ministry says a number of difficult milestones have been reached. Those include construction of the pressure hull blocks, which form the main skeleton, and the sail, the tower-like structure on top of the sub. Work on the torpedo launcher system has also begun earlier than expected. The government started building its Indigenous defense submarine in 2020 and plans to make 8 vessels in total. The first submarine is expected to be completed in September, but it won't be delivered to the Navy until 2025.
确保全案顺利的遂行，也是国防部重点的工作。目前潜舰国造的工作由台船依照合约的规范来办理。
Traveling with children can be tough. It's hard to keep kids entertained on long trips, but certain trains in southern Taiwan are livening up otherwise boring journeys with some special performances. Eric Liao takes a look.
Parents and children taking the train in southern Taiwan are getting a special treat. After a 2-year break because of the COVID-19 pandemic, performers are entertaining traveling families once again.
上这个列车，然后参与整个参与的一个互动。那今年又搭配这个交通部观光局的这个铁道年，所以呢，我们把时空列车以及这个铁道年结合在一起，也是扣合我们在推动的这个流动艺术飨宴。
The performances are a big hit with travelers.
我很喜欢这次的活动，因为它让我们有体验到猜谜，也有让我们跟那些角色互动。
车程有1个小时，可是因为有这样的一个活动，有一些推谜的一些游戏，那其实现场热络气氛很快，我就觉得好像才过20分钟，结果我们就到试营了。
Just like a real time machine, these performances make time fly. Patrick Chen and Eric Gao for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. Remember to download the TaiwanPlus app for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally today, we leave you with images of an international music festival in Lebanon with a performance in the Roman ruins of Baalbek. I'm Liao. Take care and see you next time.